I'm currently in the middle of an anti-ant operation. Yes, this entire window in the pet room is compromised. Over the past few days, I've been sealing up the different entrances that the ants have been coming through. Sometimes the entrances are like a little gap in the window or a gap in the ceiling. Not the ceiling, but the SEALING of like the wall. So I've used spackle, I've used weather stripping, some foam, I've stuck things into corners and sealed things up, and each time it manages to work. But then they find a new entrance, and it seems that the primary one, as soon as I sealed up part of the wall with the spackle, they ceased coming through. As soon as I sealed up part of the wall with the spackle, they stopped coming from there entirely, and they started coming from this window. And I sealed up the internal parts of the window with weather stripping, but now they're coming from the external parts of the window, and they're trying right now, I see them, to go through their old entrance and exit, but they can't, which is a good sign. So I'm vacuuming up each one as they go along if I have to, and making sure they can't get back to their colony and report whatever they're finding. Yeah. The Dawn Power Wash has been really good because they react to chemicals more than anything else. So, yeah, they started coming from the outside parts of the window. So I sprayed a whole bunch of Dawn Power Wash around the rim. So even though it hasn't been sealed properly, I can tell they're reacting to the presence of the power wash, and they're no longer coming out of those areas. And it doesn't look like they found a new exit point yet. But there are a few stragglers left who are still... This won't be the most pleasant video in the world, but I figure it might be funny. It's funny for me, anywho. And that's all I really need. But right now I'm waiting for... So I laid down a layer of Dawn Power Wash. And I'm letting the bubbles kind of, dissipate. I'm not going to wipe it down. I'm going to leave it there so that the chemical does a little sealing itself, a little chemical residue. I can tell they don't want to come out of those old exits anymore. And I can tell the ants are getting more desperate because what they would send only a few ants before to do, they're now having to send, like, excessive lines across the wall. And I eliminated a whole bunch in one go with the vacuum. So not really eliminating, but containing, and they're all going to get tossed out with the dumpster later. But as soon as that Dawn Power Wash settles, I got spackle next to me, and I'm going to seal up those areas with the spackle so that they can't reuse those spots. Got a paper towel here to assist with that. They're going in and out of the cracks of the cat's feeding machine. I can tell a whole bunch made their way a while ago, and they've been kind of hiding. Unless, of course, they found a new entrance from, like, a behind area. Let me catch these two. So I'm going to lift up the machine and see if they're coming from another part of the wall. Let's see. They catch as many as I can. Thankfully, I fully charged this battery before I put it on the vacuum, so I've got enough juice to do this for a while. I just don't know how many could have snuck in ahead of time before I found them. Before I found them in their new entrance. So I gotta figure out if what I'm seeing is new ants or pre-installed ants. So far from what I'm seeing, it seems like what I'm dealing with is numbers of ants that had snuck in ahead of time. And are now revealing themselves. So, let's see, lift up this machine. See if there's a new spot on the wall, or if they're really just coming out of... Where are they coming out of? They don't seem to be coming out of the outlet, or the socket, or the trimming. Oh, jeez. Okay, making messes, okay. Let's see. I just wanted to go on a walk. And then I looked into the pet room and I saw this line of ants behind the cats. So, I gotta postpone my walk and take care of this. My house is tiny, though. I gotta scrunch up in here and there's like... I've just got a crisscross applesauce, spoons in the bowl right here in the middle of the floor. And it's an elevated floor too. Right above me is the bottom of the bunk bed. This room was the bottom bunk, and then it was converted into the pet room. Darn it, I vacuumed up one of the nails. Well, it's fine. That shade never went down anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I can just retrieve the nail later when I dump out all these ants. So yeah, I wanted to go on a nice walk. I was going to listen to music, but you know what? One of my headphones was low on power, so this is giving it a chance to go ahead and charge while I deal with this scenario. This is not great, but there are reduced numbers of ants coming through, which is a plus. It means what I'm doing, at least right now, is working. But I do see the ants already looking for alternative ways in, particularly in spots that I already previously weather sealed. So I gotta make sure that the sealant is more up in these gaps. And then when it expands, it'll fill out those gaps a little better. Okay, so from what I'm seeing, the ants that are on the feeding machine do seem to just have been already here. Because the machine is completely isolated away from any walls, so there's no way they could be getting, resupply. It just means that this is kind of a tiny base currently. Stinks. Let's see. I don't imagine this is going to be a very pleasant video. Okay, so far, what I'm seeing here is, yeah, that ant wasn't able to make it through the gap. The weather seal is working right there. And all the previously placed Dawn power wash is dried up currently. I'm going to place some more in a few spots to act as kind of a guarantee. So, yeah, okay. It looks like the power wash is holding. And there are no ants coming out of the vacuum itself. I've double and triple checked that a couple times. So I do know that whatever I'm dealing with, it's not just recycling the same ants over and over. There's none coming out, which is good. That would leave me here endlessly, but now I have to take the time to go ahead and I think I'm going to leave the feeder alone for now so they get a sense of security, and then they'll start coming out and swarming the thing. They'll all be exposed, and then I can vacuum them up in one fell swoop, one go. So I'll just leave that there. Yeah, I can see them getting a little extra comfy. I know another thing they react to is vibrations, because they don't have great eyesight. They react mainly to chemicals and vibrations, so if I wait to turn on the vacuum till it's like directly on top of them, there we go, got a whole bunch at once. Okay, now I'm going to leave that be. Let me get my spackle before it dries up. What do these ants even want? Who knows? There's probably something in here in this room specifically. But regardless, Gotta start laying down the spackle. There we go. Let me get my paper towel. There we go. Start sealing up these entrances. Numa! Numa! Don't do it! I can hear you. Okay, I'm gonna have to go crate Numa. Where is she? She has a bad tendency of scratching this certain post. Oh, okay. She's being good. She has a tendency of scratching this certain post on the other side of the house. There's this certain post she likes to scratch on, which she's not supposed to. It's made of just like basic fabric, even though there's a cat scratcher. Sometimes she goes to scratch on that post instead, and it can get pretty torn up. So I've been having to get on her a bit. Even though this room is more soundproofed than the other rooms in this place, thankfully she's got cat ears so she can hear me, even though I gotta yell from in here. There we go. There we go. Alright, this is getting nice and sealed up. Just want to make sure that even with the measure taken of the power wash, that they don't get courageous enough to try and get past the chemical and then, getting in anyway. The number of ants is decreasing. Just gotta figure out. Let's see. So, keep sealing there. Okay, that part of the window's too tight for an ant to fit through, which is good for me. Okay, so now it's time to go full sail into sealing up the top part of the window. This spackle's a little old, but it'll do for what I need it for. Small step at a time, even if it's one ant. There we go. So, yeah, this is pretty much what I'm up to right now at this instant, is dealing with this ant problem. Once I finish it, though, I'm just gonna go on a nice walk, listen to some music as I go. My headphones will be nice and fully charged, at least I hope they will be by the time I'm done with this. Yeah. I went back to listen to that soundtrack that I made, and you know what? And then what I did is I went back and listened to older music, and you know what? I was pretty pleased. I was pretty pleased. I've gotten better. I have gotten better. I listened to those old tracks and I was just like, woof. That's not fantastic. Not great. Not particularly great. I'd say one of the biggest things is that my instrument choices have gotten a lot stronger, a lot sharper, and my ear for harmonies and just like how the sounds come together has gotten a lot better. And another thing is tempo. I've gotten a lot better at working at different speeds as well as different keys. And just generally... And another thing is also like mastering and mixing as well. I've gotten a lot better at making the instruments, work in the mix better and stand out, and also designing the instruments themselves, because with the software that I'm using, the bass instruments never really sound that good. So I end up mostly just having to go in and mess with the instruments myself. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at that too. I'm very pleased with it. Just the tempo, the mixing, the mastering, each step of that, I definitely feel I've gotten a lot better. And just the overall sound, it feels a lot fuller. It feels more purposeful as well. And that's something I was really hoping to accomplish. Just more purposeful decisions when it comes to the music. Being able to make more purposeful decisions and knowing slightly more what I'm doing rather than just having to always just kind of hope that random intuition will kind of bring it all together, And I was really pleased with that, because what ended up happening is that I did a lot of listening and studying, and I got some tempos that I got some tempos and like some time signature stuff that I had never accomplished before. The track I'm thinking of in particular when it comes to that is the track for the 1-minute course called Your Will Arrive, which has that has that bum 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 ba rum bum bum rum bum dum da rum bum bum rum bum bum ba rum bum 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 ba rum bum dum. Yeah, bum 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 bum, like that. That's something new for me that fell very much out of the range of what I was able to do just by improvising. Because I'm very unpracticed with it, it helped me a lot to take some sources and sort of understand where it could go, because what ends up happening is that at the start I was like, this sounds tacky, it doesn't sound right. I think when it comes to a new rhythm or something like that, my brain wants like a finished example, to sort of prove that it's a good decision, or something like that. So I just had to. So I found something like that. I didn't just go like, no, you just have to trust the process. No, I actually did find something with a similar rhythm. And then I was like, okay, so this is what this could sound like. So just like take that to heart. And stick with it during this process. Just keep working with it and you'll get something. Find more layers, counter melody, bass, and eventually it came together in a way that I really liked. When it comes to making these soundtracks, though, there are always melodies that I know I want to reuse later. The particular melody from Your Will Arrive is the one that the... Oh, hold on. Is the one that the chorus ends up singing, where it goes... And then, you know, that. I want to reuse that somewhere. There we go. Okay, that part's sealed, that part's sealed. Let's see. What else? Okay. But yeah, that melody. The da 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 da, that melody. I definitely want to reuse that for something else. And yeah, definitely would. The 2-minute chorus track, it's called Rotopedal, or Rotopedal, which just means like wheel foot, or wheel-footed, or something with wheels for legs, that kind of thing. Like bipedal, or tripedal. Rotopedal. You could also say rotopedal, bipedal, tripedal. Tripod, bipod, you can say rotopod, I guess. And, that particular track was actually a much older melody from a track that I had created that I had considered kind of a failure. It was... The original one has a very different sound. Like, I redid the instruments. It's not just taking the original one and then just, like, adding stuff to it. But it keeps a lot of like the chord progression, the main like that part is pretty much unchanged from the original, along with the well, actually, I may have cut that part out, but I know it still has the descending bass line. It still has the descending bass line and this thing where it swaps between the lead descending and then the bass descending. Oh, did I? I think I cut out the... It was just a bit much for this version. But the parts that are still like taken directly is like the bum bum And then bum 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 and the and then what was the other part? That part is from the original, and the part that's on that piano-like instrument that's before it, oh, I'm trying to remember it. Well, either way, the piano that was originally first. The that part was originally first, and it had a bass line under it. But that bass line, I separated out the bass line, and it became the first part of that piano section's melody, which then leads into the and then I added in that ending piano part afterwards. But in terms of instrumentation, it's pretty much entirely different. I went and found new sounds and new synths, and basically changed its timbre, its sound profile, its texture with brand new synths. I would say Rotopedal, Rotopod, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. I would say that's probably one of the most techie ones I've done, and I don't mean techie as in technical. I mean techie as in going into the settings and messing with them for the instruments. So a lot of the instruments in that particular track have tremolo on them, or lots of vibrato. They have a slide, so that each note kind of slides into the next, woo, 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 woo. They have a lot of I'm blanking on it. As soon as I go to think of it, I blank on it. They have a lot of the I'm blanking on what they're called as soon as I go to think of it. They got those special properties, where the notes have flair on them, or lots of punch. They have different properties like that. They'll have flair, and then I added a tremolo property on top of that to give it a little bit of an additional texture. There we go. Applying the additional spackle. Alright. So, I got that spot all spackled up. But yeah, it's definitely one of my more techie tracks, where the instruments have a lot of different effects and settings on top of them. I'm messing with feedback and things like that, and the sustain. And if the notes interrupt each other or slide into the next, things like that. Yeah. One thing I'm really proud of that I managed to accomplish with that soundtrack is... Hold on. Is the work that it has with the slap bass. I'm really proud of all the stuff I managed to pull off. The doom 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 doom, yeah, all that. I'm really proud. Boom doom 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 doom. Bum dum 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 dum. Yeah. I'm really proud of all the slap bass that I managed in that. I've always wanted to use that quite a bit, and more like Sega Genesis Spectrum chip-esque sounds. So those are featured pretty prominently in the soundtrack. There we go. But when it comes to the 3-minute track, I'd say 3-minute track is probably the best all-rounder of the soundtrack. It was pretty much... No, I did the 1-minute one first, but the 3-minute one was the first. So, in order of completion, I finished the 1-minute one, and then the 3-minute one. And the 3-minute one was going to be the 5-minute one, but then I decided to turn it into the 3-minute one. And then later I learned that there was a 2-minute course and nobody told me. So in about an afternoon, I started and finished up the 2-minute one, which was based off of older material that was then like transformed and revamped. And then the 3-minute one... Yeah, so I finished the 3-minute one, and then I learned about the 2-minute course in the middle of working on the 5-minute one, right of way. So then I was like, oh, so I nobody told me about that, so I just went ahead, found that older material, revamped it, and then completed that, and then got to work on the 5-minute course. And the 5-minute one took quite a while. There were a lot of instances when I was working on the 5-minute one where I wanted to reuse melodies and material from... Hold on, I'm watching the ants, so I'm learning about new spots I should cover up. Where I wanted to... There were plenty of spots in the 5-minute... Hold on. Yeah, there were plenty of spots in the 5-minute one where I wanted to find a way to incorporate more melodies from the title screen, which is called, We'll Go There. I wanted to find more spots. Particularly the one that goes... Excuse me. Yeah, that part. I had like a rock version going where it was like electric guitar, like, and it goes bang down down rum bang down down rum bum 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 ba rum ba da 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 ba da ba rum ba do do ba da da dum bum 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 ba da dum ba dum ba da ba dum bum do do do. It like worked pretty well, but it just I couldn't find a way to get the track, the composition, to smoothly flow into it. It just kind of like started, you know? And so, you know, I tried to work it in, but it wasn't really working out. No, like the one part that I got was like, I gotta try to remember the melody. So it goes, da dun 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 bum ba da dum. Da-dum bum ba-da-dum ba-da-dum ba-dum ba-dum ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-dum ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-da-ba-dum ba-dum dum dum da-da-dum ba-da-ba-dum ba-dum ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-dum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-da-ba-da-dum ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-da-dum ba-da-ba-da-da-da-da-da-ba-dum ba-dum ba-da-da-da-da-da-dum da-da-dum. There we go. So that was the part where I got to incorporate a little bit of the title theme, where it goes da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. That's in the title theme, and then that is incorporated into Right of Way, the 5-minute track. Da-da-dum, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-dum, dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Yeah. Yeah. So, I managed that. I managed that at least, which I was pleased with. And speaking of, back to the 3-minute track, Crossing Intersections. So yeah, that's pretty much like your all-rounder mainstay one. It's got like a nice slap bass, that kind of chill atmosphere. It has this kind of abstract flow to it, which I'm particularly proud of. There we go. Spackling another spot. It has this kind of abstract energy to it, which I'm very proud of that I managed to accomplish. Mainly with a lot of the background sounds going on in it. It has a sort of ambience going for it, even though it has more hard composed elements. I'd say in comparison to Rotopedal is a lot more it's a lot more distinctly composed in terms of just having like melody, different distinct segment. There's not as many I guess what I'm trying to say is there's not as many ambient elements in Rotopedal or even Right of Way as there is in like We'll Go There or Crossing Intersections. Crossing Intersections isn't as ambient as We'll Go There, but it does have a lot of like ambient elements in the background, things that aren't strictly musical and are more like abstract vocal cry outs and sounds, and taking advantage of like kind of synthy noises. More spots where it goes into these strange directions. But in comparison, We'll Go There has like a lot more ambience to it. It's just this very chill track. The main thing about it that you can really kind of hook onto and We'll Go There, I would say, is probably like the guitar melody. Yeah, the guitar melody and the drums particularly. Yeah. There we go. Got that sealed up. But yeah, particularly the drums. And when it comes to Right of Way, I would say Crossing Intersections was kind of like me attempting a bit of that kind of city fusion sound. You know, not that I really managed to accomplish it, but that like city pop kind of sound to it, but with a little more ambience. And then this is sealing really well. Hold on, let me make sure I'm good here with this. Yeah, not bad. And then what time is it? Okay. And then Right of Way. Right of Way is definitely meant to be like rock and roll. Like, I was going for a very rock and roll-esque feeling to it, and different kinds of rock. Even sometimes going into, or at least attempting to do, a little bit of metal as well. So especially like that opening of like dun da 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 ba da ba da ba da 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 ba da 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 ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da 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 ba da ba da ba da ba da ba da da boom da 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 ba do 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 do. I guess the closest thing I would probably compare it to is probably like prog rock, really. I don't know if I really managed to hit, you know, metal or anything, but it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from more prog rock sources. And then there's that part, yeah, more prog rocky. What I wanted to accomplish with Right of Way was mixing together sort of that Super Mario Kart kind of SNES, you know, doom 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 boom 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 doom 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 boom doom 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 boom doom 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 doom, kind of those instrument choices, mixing it with Sega Genesis, so like the two 16-bit sounds kind of coming together and mixing. So you have that kind of like second section of the track where it goes into that kind of bass breakdown and then introduces the ba-dun dun 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 ba-dun dun 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 ba-dum ba-dum ba-da ba-da ba-da-bum ba-da ba-da ba-da-dum bum bum dum dum da-da-da-dum ba-dum bum bum ba-da-bum ba-da-da-dum ba-dum ba-da-da-da-da-da-dum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum da-da-da-dum dum 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 dum. Yeah, I would say overall, when it came to the soundtrack, it was like trying to mix in some fusion, a little bit of like city pop, but also especially like classic rock and roll and blues. So there are, especially in Right of Way, I'd say that's the most rocky one, but it also has some really bluesy parts too. At least I hope so. At least I hope it does. But like I went for that kind of like typical the doom 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 doom. Yeah. Bum 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 rum bum 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 bum. That classic kind of rock riff. there's at least one part, and it's when Right of Way does a quick reference to Rotopedal with the it does a quick quote of Rotopedal, and the bass line is doing the or not exactly like that, but it's doing like a close variation of that kind of rock and roll riff. The at least my version of it. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of going for the same spirit of it. There we go. I'm just about done with this sealing job. Sealing all the entrances and exits. Make sure that these ants can't get back in. They can't keep getting away with this! There we go. Yeah. Alright, let's see here. Let's see. Just keeping an eye on things, checking to make sure that everything is kosher. That's all sealed. That's all sealed. Okay. Seems good. I think I'm done for now. I can go take that walk. But yeah, Right of Way is especially meant to kind of be bluesy with like rock and roll. It kind of goes through just like my different likes with with rock. So there's that part of it where it goes. I'm trying to remember that. And then it has like a. And what's that part? Yeah. No, I can't do it like right off the dome with that part. But there's a part where Right of Way goes into more prog rock territory for like a solid minute. Yeah. And I really enjoyed making that part in particular. I was very pleased with how that part turned out. Because I'd never done anything quite like that before. Going in that such a strong sort of prog rock direction and messing with time signatures that much. There we go. Make sure this is attached. But yeah, going in that direction and messing with time signatures that much, I've never done something quite like that, and all the arpeggiation that went on in that part in particular, I was very pleased that I managed to pull it off. Especially that part where the piano comes in. I was very pleased with the part where the piano comes in. But with Right of Way, there was a previous draft of the ending. The do 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 do. Boo do 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 do. There was a previous draft which had more of the melody that I had mentioned before from the end of We'll Go There. Only it went too far in a more electronic music kind of direction, and it just wasn't fitting. And it just wasn't fitting for the overall feel of the track. So I ended up cutting it. I ended up just going ahead and cutting it out. But the one remnant from that original ending, there we go. The one remnant from the original ending of Right of Way is that bass line. That do 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 do. Yeah, that part is the only carryover. Hold on, you guys. I'm sorry, I had to lock you guys out of here. We're in reverse. You guys get to stay in there, out there, in the living room, and I get to be the one in the pet room. For your own good, kittens. You can't be around all this spackle and this stuff. If you swallow it, you'll definitely start losing fur and getting all manners of ailments and diseases. And we can't have that. There we go. They only want back in because the food machine's in here. There we go. Okay. Gonna vacuum. Get all this spackle off the ground. What's left is to just wipe down any spots that got a little speckle on them. Don't worry, you guys can come back in a second. But any Hoosiers, so yeah, so Right of Way went through a few iterations for its ending. There we go. And some hydrogen peroxide on that. It went through a few iterations for its ending, but I ultimately settled on the one, well, that's in the final track. And, yeah. One thing I really liked about crossing intersections was creating that like boom 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 it had kind of like a party feel, like waving your arms around in the air, kind of a fiesta, a racing fiesta of joy. And I'm really glad that sound kind of came out of it. Because it's meant to be kind of like, not kooky crazy, but like, we're getting loco! That kind of thing. Like, it's a party. Get loose. That kind of feeling. And with the 1 minute track, the 1 minute track is really just a gag mostly. It being so dramatic and full of like operatic grandeur, it's entirely sarcastic. Because, nobody's probably going to actually play the game. But, it's the kind of game where, like, why would you only ever play 1 minute? That was the mindset behind the 1 minute track, which was, why would you ever only play 1 minute of this? It would be like, playing Super Mario Brothers and there's like a 30-second mode. And there are times, where it's like, rush mode. Oh, it's difficult. Things are flying at you. You gotta survive for 30 seconds or, see how far you can get. But with this kind of game, the 1 minute mode is exactly the same as every other mode. You just do it for 1 minute instead of 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So, I was just thinking to myself, like, there's literally no difference between who would settle for the 1 minute mode? Who would do this for just 1 minute? The only way to get any real worth out of this really is to do it for longer. Well, not any real worth, but the way to get the most worth out of it is to do it for longer. Like, why would you only do the 1 minute mode in a game like this if with this setup, So I jokingly made that track to be like, the joke is that it's like do or die, life or death situation. The world's most intense singular minute. Like, it's 1 minute of this game that you couldn't possibly really, like, get anything out of just playing it for 1 minute. So the 1 minute track is just kind of entirely sarcastic about, like, this is the most dramatic, this is the minute. It's filled with so much pomp and circumstance and grandeur, this singular minute that you're playing this game for. And that's why it has that overly dramatic feel going on with it. Might as well make it feel like the world's most dire, interesting, life-changing minute, even though it's exactly the same as all the other stuff except shorter. So that's like what I figured with it, That's why it's like that. Give it some pomp and circumstance. There we go. Yeah. And as for the other music, let me think. What else is there? There's Eddie Road, Flash on the Dash, and then there's, oh yeah, one thing that I wanted, when it came to the Game Over theme, / Try Again theme, which is called Eddie Road, one thing I wanted was for it not to feel like a great big, didn't want the person to feel like this was some kind of detrimental failure if they lost. Instead, to create a track that... Hold on. Create a track with a very friendly feeling to it. That's like, has this, it's like it's a track that sort of says, like, it's alright if you messed up. You don't need to get it perfect. Just try again. Go for it again. A track that's sort of meant to emphasize that, it's alright to fail. Go for it again. Try and learn from your mistakes and give it another go. That failing or messing up isn't game over. It's not world ending, but that it's just taking a break or going on vacation, stepping away for a second, or just gathering yourself and trying again. There we go. I'm gonna rinse out their water machine. Hold on, kitten. You gotta rinse out your water machine now. Make sure that there's no foreign contaminants inside of your water. I'm gonna wash it down. There we go. So it's composed in a very light-hearted way with those steel drum instruments and a light melody with a little bit of like silliness added into it. It's not entirely super duper positive. There's a part where it's like, oh gee, oh golly gee willikers, we messed up. Oh, how could this happen? It's kind of cartoony, like, oh no. But it never drops into like, this was detrimental, you failed, that kind of thing. And my one very good friend, he was doing the visual assets for the game, and I asked him if, instead of saying game over, if it could say try again. That would have happened, except the person who requested the game also later on requested that any ability to lose be removed from the game. So no matter how many hits you take, no matter what, your car will just kind of recover and you just keep moving forward. It's impossible to actually lose. You'll essentially just get bumped, like get juggled around for a little bit, and then you'll get bumped, get juggled around for a little bit, and then your car will reorient and you'll just keep driving. So there's no actual... There's even... how do I word this? There's even a sprite, and you can see it on the soundtrack video for the car being destroyed or totaled. for the car being totaled, it has its front bent in. There was originally an animation in the game for the car dramatically spinning out. And was really intense too, like comedically intense. Like the car would just go and like spin like a top right off screen. Well, not off screen, but it would like spin like a top right off to the side of the road. And there was going to be a game over, but it ultimately, that got shut off. So, you know, the assets are still in there, and the code for the lose condition, but it's been completely turned off. It's impossible to actually do it in-game. So, the game over track, Eddie Road, ultimately goes unused in the final game. Because there's no game over, or try again. But, let me think. Is there anything else to that? No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, when it came down to the music, I tried to find ways to incorporate the melodies a couple times as motifs. The 3-minute track also has like a pretty extended segment that it also appears in the menu theme. We'll go there. Do 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 Yeah, part of that appears in the 3-minute track. And then the Game Over theme and Eddie Road both share a motif. It goes dum bum dum 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 bum dum dum bum dum 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 ba da bum ba bum ba dum bum bum da dum bum bum ba da da dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba. I know I'm not doing it perfectly right now, but that's as close as I'm gonna get at the moment. Okay, almost done, kittens. Hold on, you'll be in here soon. Let me put the hydrogen peroxide away. Look at that. I don't see a line of ants anymore. Let's see how long that holds. I can hang up the blinds again later on. But first, I'm going to leave the blinds down for a while. Just in case the ants come back, I don't want to have to go and start messing with the blinds. Yeah, I don't want to go and have to start messing with the blinds and unscrewing them again in case ants start coming from that crevice again. Because if they do, I'd have to go through the trouble of unscrewing it again, so let me give it a couple days so I can confirm. And then, as soon as I can confirm that the window, the top of the window area, is no longer a threat zone, I'll be able to go ahead and put the shade back on, because then it won't get in the way of me having to handle any additional areas. There we are. Okay. Hold on just a moment. Okay, placed it neatly. Got the string cover so Numa doesn't bite through the strings. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Eddie Road and Telemetrics 96, or Telematics. I'm blanking on it right now. As soon as I go to think about it, it's just gone. But anywho, I think it's Telematics 96, not Telemetrics. But they both share the same motif, and then Crossing Intersections also has that same motif hidden towards the end in the background. I believe it's pan to the left ear. Yeah, it's pan to the left ear with those oh my gosh, all you ants, get out of my pet's feeding my water machine. Oh my gosh. How many of you are hiding in here? My goodness. Get out. This is ridiculous. You guys will hide anywhere. There we go. Anyway, yeah, it's hidden, pan to the left ear. It's not like super hidden. I mean, you could probably recognize it. But Crossing Intersections also has that motif inside of it. So Crossing Intersections, I think it really has the most... Does Crossing Intersections? It kind of does, I would say so. It has the most, like, hidden structural elements taken or shared in relation to other tracks. So it has that motif from Telematics 96, and it also has, and shared with Eddie Road, and then Crossing Intersections opening also is pulled from the structure of We'll Go There. We'll Go There's opening was used to structure Crossing Intersections opening. With things like the additional bass line. In fact, Crossing Intersections was originally essentially just going to be a remix of We'll Go There. Like, rearranged, essentially. But as I went along, I realized how time-consuming that was. I realized how... Oh, down you go, ants. Down you go, down you go. No, 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 you're not coming back up. Down you go. But as I went along, I realized how time-consuming it was ending up becoming, trying to essentially, like, rearrange the opening theme. So, there were more melodic segments taken from We'll Go There originally that ended up getting replaced with original segments for Crossing Intersections. there were originally more pulled from that got replaced with the original ones, but at least a few made it in. So Crossing Intersections kind of shares the most DNA with a lot of the other tracks. Though Right of Way is pretty close, I would say. Right of Way does have... I think the difference, though, is that Right of Way, the DNA that Right of Way shares isn't as intensive, because, like, Crossing Intersections has straight references to the other tracks, or straight melodic segments that are shared with the other tracks, down to stating entire bars of some of the other tracks in its runtime. There we go. Whereas Right of Way, the most I can think that it really does is it has like smaller... It doesn't have full melodic lines, it just has smaller motif bits from some of the other tracks. It's not as sustained as Crossing Intersections gets when it comes to using shared musical material. The most that Right of Way does is quoting the opening of Rotopedal. With the but that's pretty much as far as it goes. And even then, like, the opening of Rotopedal isn't exactly, it's not particularly complex. It's essentially just, and then stated again, but with a slight change in, like, the ending. Whereas the other parts, it's like a lot more complex melodic lines that have a lot more motifs inside of them, parts that could be taken and stated elsewhere. Whereas with Right of Way, the quote it makes from... There we go, let me grab this. The quote that it makes from Rotopedal is essentially like a motif. Whereas what Crossing Intersections quotes from other tracks is essentially what could become like multiple motifs or bases for other tracks. Excuse me, let me put this back. There we go. Alright. Everybody come and eat. Yeah, what could become bases for several tracks. Excuse me, Ken. I gotta wipe this spot here. There we go. Alright. Yeah, what could become the bases for several tracks. And I know for sure in the future that that's pretty much exactly what a lot of the elements in these tracks will be used for. They will be used for motifs and the foundations of other melodies in other projects. There we go. There you go. Drink up, kitten. Foundations, yeah, for motifs in other projects and melodies and tracks, compositions. I tend to do that. A part of me is always driven to always be making new melodies, new motifs, things like that, but I've also been very adamant on learning how to go about using existing musical material and getting more worth out of it. You know, it's the symphonic way. Mutation, you know, transformation, development, inversion, you know, all that. You watch those lectures by Leonard Bernstein, especially the one where he analyzes Brahms' Second Symphony, I believe it was. I mean, that's like the one. That's the prime one where he just goes over the symphonic form and what you do in a classical symphony. And that's something that I'm striving to get better at. Because when it comes down to it, I'm not really the biggest fan of the sort of traditional trajectory, I guess you could say, the shape, the form that modern music tends to take. I like long music. I like music that goes on for a while and goes in different directions and plays with melodies and motifs and develops them in interesting ways. I don't think they always have to be long, though. I think it's just that long music tends to actually do what I'm describing more often because, you know, you kind of have to. It's long form, unless you're just, you know, looping the same thing over and over for 10 minutes. But there are definitely some short compositions that just... Yeah, I'd say that's the key of it, is that with long compositions, you're more likely to get... But there are plenty of long compositions, you know. I'll sit down and try to listen to a new symphony I haven't heard before, and I'm just like... yeesh. And then I just kind of turn it off, and like, go back to the, you know, symphonies that I like. I've tried a lot of them. Especially once you get to, like, 21st century symphonies. It's just a whole lot of uninteresting, you know? It's technically there, you know? All the work has been put in. You can take out your chart, or you can take out your diagram, your flow, you know, whatever it is. A flow chart, your instruction manual. And, you know, it's a very... What you'll get is a very technically sound piece of work, but it lacks any of the vision, the drive, the fun, the obsession, the point, Well, something that it's like there's music for music's sake in the sense of, you're not doing it you're doing it for the love of the craft, but then there's also just making music for music's sake. Does that make sense? Maybe I can distinguish it better. I guess you could say making music for structure's sake, more so. If that makes sense. Music for music's sake in the sense of musical structure. It's like music made to fulfill all the technical aspects of music made to fulfill all the technical aspects of the craft, of the process, But there's no... It's like how, when you have the guys sitting around the campfire in ancient days and they're just telling stories and things like that. They haven't analyzed the hero's journey or gotten out a flow chart and looked over, they haven't gone to a writing course where they've analyzed like plot, composition, and rising action and things like that. Not that those things are bad. But you have those guys sitting around the campfire telling stories. And it's for the desire of it, the love of it. The excitement, Not just not just for other people, but for themselves as well. There's a joy in telling these stories, trying to outdo themselves, be creative. Is it for passion? Is it for love? Is it for rage, anger, hunger, looking for something higher, meditation, things like that. It's not story for the sake of utilizing the structure, the diagram, But when it comes to a lot of modern symphonic work and things like that, a lot of the times it really just feels like the music exists to fill in some blanks on a printout, Does it have the rising action? Does it have this? Does it have that? That kind of thing. There we go. A few straggler ants. And to me, my stance on that matter is it's not bad to have that structure, It exists for a reason. It tends to make not always quality, but it keeps a certain baseline in terms of the output of stories, It's all technically there, but that's kind of where the problem is that when it's all technically there, but that's all that is there, is the the technical part of it, but there's no particular story to tell, nothing to convey, nothing behind it that was trying to be conveyed, you know? Anywho, there we go. I've probably gone on long enough, just yammering. It was nice, though, to sort of make myself some company while I cleaned out that ant situation in the pet room. But now I'm all done, so I'll stop taking up your time, you know. And I'm gonna throw this trash out and finally go on that walk I was talking about. Probably find a nice picture to take and upload this along the way. But, yeah, suffice it to say, that'll be the end of my... Sorry for that sound. Yeah. That'll be the end of my talking for today. But, thanks for joining me. And I'll see you next time.